Pour yourself another one, friend, or whatever you've got in that cup. Pull up a chair. You look like you've been through a good fight, sure, but trust me, the story I'm about to tell you didn't leave me with bruises. It left a void. The whole mess started 5 cycles ago, out at Outpost Zeta 7 in the K3 sector. This is the real confession, the one I recorded for Regimental Command, designated Gamma 940, but kept classified. You need to know I still assume full responsibility for violating Standard Operating Procedure Gamma and for the unsanctioned termination of Imperial personnel. The incident began as a routine distress signal, a code red, indicating complete silence from a frontier monitoring station, manned by approximately 150 troops. My regiment, the 41st Cadian Heavy Infantry, was the closest response unit, though our mission was strictly enforcement, not rescue. I personally led a small squad of 12 veteran guardsmen and 2 field scribes. We arrived under a pale, sickly sun. Outpost Zeta 7 was structurally intact, but the silence was immediate and profound. It was not the silence of the dead, but the terrifying absence of sound where sound should naturally be. No wind, no ambient machine hum, no comms chatter. We breached the main habitation block. The interior was spotless, almost surgically clean. There was no blood, no fire, and no blast damage. Yet every single desk, locker, and bunk was overturned, as if by a sudden, unseen explosion of panic. The air in the facility felt thick, like wading through warm oil, and the smell was indescribable. It was not the scent of death or decay, but the raw electric smell of terror itself. We moved deeper, through the canteen and into the medical bay. This is where we found the first bodies. Approximately 3 dozen troopers, fully armored, were clustered tightly in the corner of the medical bay. They were not shot or stabbed, but curled up like children. Their faces, frozen in a grotesque mask of agony, were devoid of physical trauma save for one detail: their eyes. Their eyes had been forced open so wide that the capillaries had ruptured, filling the whites with a crimson web. They died from sheer, unadulterated fear. One of the scribes immediately began to weep. I had him disciplined, not for weakness, but to immediately refocus the minds of the others. We split the remaining 600 meters of the complex into 3 search patterns. The deeper we went, the worse the psychic resonance became. I could feel the edges of my sanity fraying, the deep-seated fears I had long buried, the guilt of past decisions, the faces of the executed. They began to whisper in the back of my mind. It felt like a pressure cooker of internalized horror. In the armory, we found the weapons rack empty and the secure storage vault forcibly opened. This confirmed that the enemy was not from outside, but an enemy from within. A threat that bypassed conventional defense and seized the weapons. We followed the trail of psychic decay to the command center. It was there, among the flickering console lights and scattered data slates, that we found the sole survivor, Private Yevgeny Volkov. He was sitting in the command chair, completely untouched, clutching a field communicator to his chest. He was humming a low, repetitive, tuneless melody. When my sergeant, Commander Marius, attempted to restrain him, Volkov looked up. His eyes were not red, but completely black, glossy and impossibly deep. Volkov did not speak to us. He spoke to the air, to the shadows, using a voice that was clearly his own, yet simultaneously echoed the voices of the dead men we had just seen. He spoke of the Whisperer, the psychic entity that had arrived through the warp, not to attack with physical force, but to feel and feed. The Whisperer drew out terror like venom, amplifying the most minor fears into a tidal wave of paralyzing, deadly panic. Volkov was its anchor, the vessel it used to broadcast its corrosive influence across the entire outpost. When Volkov realized we were there, his humming stopped. He smiled the terrible smile of a broken machine that suddenly found purpose. Through him, The whisperer spoke directly into my mind, not with words but with images. I saw every man I had ever executed for cowardice, every tactical failure I had ever made, projected onto the walls of the command center. I saw the regiment annihilated, my superiors calling me a fraud. The psychic pressure was immense. One of my veterans, a man named Tarl, collapsed, clutching his head and screaming about spiders that were not there. It was in that moment of absolute psychic siege that I understood the nature of the threat. The entity did not need to be fought with bullets. It was a contagion of the mind, and Volkov was the vector, a living psychic megaphone for pure, weaponized fear. If we brought him back, if we merely contained him, the psychic stain would follow, spreading through the regiment, poisoning the entire Cadian 41st. The execution order was not an act of punishment. It was an act of absolute quarantine. I drew my sidearm. Volkov, seeing the intent in my eyes, began to laugh, a high, unnatural sound that broke the last of the silence. The whisperer screamed inside my head, promising me eternal damnation, promising to make me relive every single regret for 1,000 years. I fired a full clip into Volkov's head, riddling him until his body slumped, and the terrible, echoing laughter was silenced. The moment Volkov's body hit the floor, the psychic pressure ceased. The air became thin and cold. The fear, which had been a tangible presence, simply evaporated. The outpost was still silent, but it was the normal, sterile silence of death now, not the oppressive quiet of a mind being eaten alive. Tarl stopped screaming, covered in sweat, and looked around in confusion. We executed the remaining orders. The veterans secured the facility. The scribes were instructed to document the incident as a mutiny and subsequent mass suicide following exposure to extreme isolation and psychological stress, omitting any mention of the psychic entity or Volkov's final moments. We sealed the command center, ensuring Volkov's remains would never be subjected to further inquiry. The outpost was classified destroyed in action, and orbital bombardment was requested to wipe the physical evidence of the taint from Imperial records. I reported back to regimental command with a clean, if devastating summary of the loss of 150 Imperial lives to an internal breakdown. I am concluding this statement now. My actions were unsanctioned. They violated the sanctity of Imperial life. But the alternative was the complete psychic collapse of an entire regiment, potentially compromising an entire subsector. I chose the controlled, localized execution over the widespread infection. I accept any ruling of the regimental high court, up to and including execution. My only solace is the certainty that the threat was neutralized, and the greater truth remains safely buried. Commissar Kyle, end of recording. The date is 5 cycles past the incident at Zeta 7.